Part 1A, we learned that an FCE is a comparison between what the client can do and what the client is required to do. The results of testing are compared to either the physical demands of the job or to the activities of daily living. But how did the FCE evolve to this point? In Part 1B, we will explore the evolution of the FCE. This slide shows a picture of one of the first instruments invented to measure muscle force. It's a hand grip measurement tool made in London in 1798. The device is similar to the grip devices we use today. The instrument was used for assessing human muscle force and determining clinical progression of neuromuscular weakness. In Canada, 1910 is an important year in the development of the FCE. Workers' compensation in Canada had its beginnings in the province of Ontario. In 1910, Chief Justice William Meredith was appointed to a royal commission to study workers' compensation. In his final report, known as the Meredith Report, which was produced in 1913, Meredith outlined what are now commonly referred to as the Meredith Principles. They included no-fault compensation, nobody gets sued and the workplace injuries are compensated regardless of fault, and collective liability. The total cost of the compensation system is shared by all employers. Essentially, the report suggested a trade-off in which the workers relinquished their right to sue in exchange for compensation benefits. Meredith advocated for no-fault insurance, collective liability, independent administration, and exclusive jurisdiction. The origins of work hardening are found in the United States in the early 1900s. Industrial rehabilitation began in response to the large number of World War I disabled veterans. In 1920, the passage of the United States Vocation Rehabilitation ACT provided funds to assist disabled workers to return to work by retraining the disabled worker around the disability. Among the earliest efforts were programs in industrial therapy, which was defined as the prescribed use of activities inherent to the hospital authorization, planned for the mutual benefit of the patient and the institution. Patients were assigned to work in keeping with aptitudes, interests, experience, and therapeutic goals. Treatment in these curative workshops was geared to restoration of the impairment. Graded activities, often planned along the lines of physical demands of the patient's original job, were used to improve function. Therapeutic activities were adapted so that the muscles he had always used and must use again in his job are brought into play and restored to the patient's functional and economic needs. In the 1940s, the first work evaluation program was established at Rochester Rehabilitation Center in New York. This program was an evaluation center that supplied information for the identification of appropriate vocational goals. Individuals who had gained maximal physical restoration were admitted to the work evaluation program. In this program, clients were presented with a variety of industrial jobs in work conditions that simulated the industrial environment. Over the course of several weeks, clients would learn to work at maximum efficiency to meet industrial standards. Perhaps the best example of an early occupational rehabilitation program can be found in Wegg's description of work therapy program at Morrison Center for Rehabilitation in San Francisco. This program consists of those activities which are simulations of actual on-the-job conditions, which can be used both as an estimate of ability and as an exercise medium to develop work habits, confidence, increase physical and emotional tolerance, improve strength, range of motion, coordination, and dexterity. The familiar working situations promote good physiological effects. The clear treatment objectives provide motivation. The availability of tools used in his trade allows the injured worker to begin developing the speed and the skill he attained during his employment. The occupational therapist is provided with an opportunity to grade activities as to length of time, resistance used, distances that weights are lifted and carried, positions of work, and so on. During this period, we begin to see the creation of the first standardized test to measure function. The Purdue Pegboard test was first developed by Joseph Tiffin, an industrial psychologist at Purdue University in 1948. In the late 1950s, there was a movement towards using standardized vocational testing procedures, which led to the development of the profession of vocational evaluation. Vocational evaluation was seen as a comprehensive assessment process that used standardized work samples and psychometric tests to evaluate aptitudes, interests, temperaments, and skills. Pre-vocational programs such as the Institute for the Crippled and Disabled in New York helped develop a client's work habits, work tolerances, coordination, and productivity to levels acceptable for entry into vocational evaluation. The decision to undergo pre-vocational evaluation and training, begin vocational evaluation, or go directly to job training was made by the rehabilitation team. This team often used information gained from structured work tests or from physical capacity evaluations developed and administered by occupational therapists. Work Hardening was introduced as a new occupational rehabilitation program model. Developed at Rancho Los Amigos in California, this model utilized functional capacity evaluation to identify appropriate level of physical challenge to be presented to the injured worker in graded work simulation and structured physical conditioning tasks. The purpose of Work Hardening was to assist the injured worker to develop the work tolerances, habits, and attitudes that were necessary to return and to remain in the competitive workplace. In the late 1970s and early 1980s, the Rancho model was adopted by other centers in California. Soon thereafter, these standards were circulated throughout the United States and Canada. Standardized methods for performing range of motion assessment were published in the AMA Guides to Impairment. The Guides to Impairment were first published in 1971 in book form. The spread of work hardening based on functional capacity led to the manufacturing of equipment to standardize this process. One of the first manufacturers was Valpar. Founded in 1973, Valpar initially provided vocational evaluation services in western United States. Valpar produced over 20 different work samples. The work samples were based on method times measurement, MTM, industrial performance standards, thus allowing assessment results to be related directly to competitive performance in job world. On the left-hand part of the screen, we can see 3 of these samples. In the upper left is the Valpar 9 used for upper extremity testing. In the middle is the Valpar 19 used for lifting and carrying. And finally, the Valpar 4 used for gross and fine dexterity. In the 1980s, the Commission on the Accreditation of Rehabilitation Facilities, CARF, undertook the development of standards. The first CARF standards were implemented on July 1, 1988. These standards included a definition with specific program standards that would need to be met by any program desiring CARF accreditation. Soon after the standards were published, organizations began to request accreditation. In 1981, we see the standardization and the acceptance of isometric lifting. In an isometric lift test, the subject is required to slowly increase the force exerted until they reach a level which feels safe. No specific feedback or challenges are given during the testing. This procedure has been proposed in the ergonomic guide as being a safe and reliable procedure. It has been used in a number of industrial studies testing over 3,000 individuals, and no injuries have been reported in the above procedure. This is an excerpt from the 1981 NIOSH Guides to Manual Lifting. In 1985, we see the development of the hand grip norms, commonly known as the JMAR norms. These were in fact done by Mathiowicz, published in his paper, Grip and Pinch Strength Normative Data. The study included 628 volunteers, 310 men, and 318 women, aged between 20 and 94 years. Subjects were interviewed at shopping centers, fairs, senior citizen centers, a rehabilitation center, and a university. All subjects were from the 7-county Milwaukee region, which includes urban, suburban, and rural areas. Mathiowicz and Associates used the JMAR dynamometer and the B&L pinch gauge, which speaks to why it is commonly known as the JMAR norms. Standardization in isometric lifting led to the creation of standardized dynamic lift tests. In this excerpt from the Pyle article, we read, "Dynamic tests of trunk strength and lifting capacity have become more popular in recent years, offering certain advantages over static isometric tests in measuring patient progress in functional restoration programs for spinal disorders." In this study, a new dynamic test known as the Progressive Isoinertial Lifting Evaluation is described. The Pyle protocol has become one of the most commonly used lifting tests. Standardization of tests started in the 1940s with the Purdue pegboard, continued through the 70s with the range of motion and the work samples, and then into the 80s with the hand grip, isometric, and dynamic lifting. Once the tests became standardized protocols were developed. A protocol is a series of tests. For example, a protocol may consist of spinal range of motion test, a reaching test, and a dynamic lift test. There is no one universally accepted FCE protocol. There's no regulation around who can perform or what needs to be included in an FCE. FCE protocols vary in time to conduct from 1 hour to 16 hours. The 1980s brought the first standardization of these protocols. Starting in the mid-1980s, Susan J. Eiserhagen, PT, created the Eiserhagen protocol. In 1983, Keith Blankenship created the Blankenship protocol. Both of these protocols standardized the tests to be included in a functional capacity evaluation. Both of these protocols standardized the methods in which to conduct the individual tests. And finally, both of these methods standardized the reporting format by which the FCE report should be formulated. Glenda Key developed the Key method in 1985 in Minnesota. Roy Matheson started Matheson in 1988 in New Hampshire. The late 80s and the early 90s saw an increase in the use of computers. There then became the computerization of a protocol. In 1986, the Ergo simulator was released, followed in 1992 by the Archon FCE system. Both of these systems created a standardized method by which to conduct the functional capacity evaluation. Both of these systems utilized a computer to assist the evaluator in conducting these evaluations. The computer would provide the evaluator with the protocol in which to follow. In the case of the Archon, the computer would also include a standardized method for data collection. Squeezing a hand grip and the data would automatically be transferred into the system. Both of these systems included the data collection and data analysis being done by the software, in which the report would automatically be generated. Generally, all standardized FCE protocols use very similar tests. Some standardized protocols like Eiserhagen use manual data collection tools with the results being entered into a software program for report generation. In contrast, the computer systems provide automated tools to collect the data and therefore generate the reports. The Metriks System is the next evolution in the FCE. The Metriks System is a web-based FCE system that can be accessed anywhere via the internet using a computer or a handheld device. The Metriks System uses inexpensive, durable, portable manual tools for data collection. It automates the data collection with a customizable protocol and automates the report writing through the use of customizable templates.